All right, so for those of you who were here last week in the live lesson, and don't worry if you weren't, okay, it's okay. We went over this progression test because I said that progression tests are very much mirrored on what the exam looks like. So what the progression test does is exactly what the exam does, okay, tests certain skills in a certain way. So it's really worthwhile going through some progression tests as practice for the exam at some point. Don't worry if you're new to Foundation English. You don't have to write your exam now. You'll be writing it at the end of the year, of your academic year. But all of this is learning information that you'll need as you go through the course anyway. So don't worry, wherever you are in the course, you will learn something in each live lesson. So it's worthwhile coming along just for that. And for any new people signing on, please make sure to say hi in the chat box so that I've got a record of your name for the register. Okay, so just type hi in the chat box. The chat box is that little speech bubble. Good, yes, little speech bubble at the bottom of your screen. So we had started looking at this progression test in last week's live lesson, and I didn't get around to going through the second bit of the first part of the paper. So today I wanted to focus on summaries. And being able to summarize is a very, very important skill. You'll use it throughout life, no matter what you're doing, whether you're giving directions to somebody, telling a friend what you did on the weekend, trying to catch a classmate up on work that they've missed, for example. So this is the kind of thing that you would do when you summarize. And as you work up through the years in high school and eventually in university, if you go to university, you will draw on those summarization skills. So it's a very, very important thing to do, to learn, to master, should I say. So we got up to about page 6 last week where we're looking at Komodo dragons. And here they're going to give us an extract. And it's an extract from a website about dragons. So I'm going to have a read through this, and then we're going to look at how we could summarize some of the information that we're given in it. Okay. So let me just bring up the chat box in case you have questions as we go along, so I can see it. There we go. Okay, brilliant. All right, great. Glad to see you here. All right, so the text starts with a title, Dragons Across Cultures. So we're going to be looking at two things, right? We're going to be looking at dragons, the concept of dragons, and something else. What in particular? Cultures. So remember, always pay attention to the ideas that you're given in a title. It will help to focus your mind on what's going to be explored in the extract. Wherever you live, you have probably heard of dragons and may even assume that all cultures see dragons in the same way. However, such an assumption is not correct. In some cultures, the dragon is viewed as a monster, but in others, such as China and Vietnam, the dragon is perceived quite differently. There, they are valued for their magic and beauty and respected. Their anatomy, their behavior, their symbolism, and what they mean to society are viewed with quite different eyes. In these cultures, dragons are used in ceremonies and parades. Although they may look like monsters, they actually symbolize heroism, not danger and threat. Indeed, they are considered more a protector than a villain and are very much a symbol of power. The Chinese even have a year of the dragon, and it is said that everyone born in this year will be healthy, wealthy, and wise. All of the qualities which the dragon is said to represent. The year of the dragon is said to be a very prosperous year for the people of China. Okay, so we've given a bit of background as to the topic, specifically dragons and culture. All right, so keep that in mind as we start to work through our summary. But before we do that, there is a question that you'll get on the extract, which will test to see how closely you've read it. Right? I won't read it again because I think it's quite. We'll look at it closely when we do the summary. So let's just look at these questions. It says, tick to show which of these statements, according to the text, are true about how dragons are seen in Chinese and Vietnamese cultures. So testing to see whether you've picked up on that specifically. Now, if you remember, we read the introduction. It was a general introduction to cultures and the way that most cultures or some cultures view dragons as monsters. But in others, and here you see the key words, China and Vietnam, well, what about them? The dragon is perceived quite differently. They are valued for magic and beauty. Their anatomy, what is anatomy? Does anybody know? Any suggestions? What is anatomy? Anybody want to give me a clue as to what that is? And anybody who's just joined, please make sure you type hi in the chat box so that I have a record of your name for the register. Does anybody know what anatomy means? Great, hi. Anybody know what anatomy means? Good, yes. It's the body, okay? The way a body is constructed, all right? So it refers to the body, your anatomy, the way you are built, the way you are designed, all right? So their anatomy, their behavior, the way that they are, their characteristics, their symbolism, what they symbolize, and what they mean to society are viewed with quite different eyes. Okay, so when we look at China and Vietnam, we're talking about Eastern culture. And so we can assume that the writer is talking about the different views in Western culture as opposed to Eastern culture. Okay, so you have those two different contrasting views. And in Western culture, dragons would be seen as enemies, generally, that maybe not so much nowadays. There's a lot of fantasy that tries to sort of improve the image of dragons in Western culture, but they're seen as dangerous beasts that are greedy, that hoard gold for themselves, and that are formidable enemies, that are wise and that are tricky, and whom you have to defeat. And at some point in medieval literature, there would have been knights who would have fought dragons to save some princess from being devoured. So dragons are seen in quite a negative light. But here in Eastern culture, they're not. They're seen completely differently. And so the question is asking about Chinese and Vietnamese culture specifically. Here we can see they're seen as magical, beautiful. Everything is different. Even what they symbolize is different. And then they go on to explain exactly what this difference is. Let's see. They symbolize heroism, not danger and threat. Indeed, they are considered more a protector than a villain, and they are a symbol of power. Okay, Chinese even have a year of the dragon, and this idea of the year of the dragon will be linked to health, wealth, and wisdom. All of the qualities which the dragon is said to represent. All right, so let's have a look at ticking the valid statements. Now, beware, just because there are 2 points for this question does not mean that you only have to give 2 answers. It's a bit of a tricky one because usually I would use the point system as a way to know, okay, how many ticks should I do? But this is going to test how close you've read it. People look up to the dragons in Chinese and Vietnamese cultures. Would you say that's right? I would say that's right. Yes, they look up to dragons. Okay, they're treated with respect. The dragons are symbols of destruction. They destroy things. No, we haven't seen that, so we're not going to tick that. People believe dragons will look after them. Yes, because they are seen as protectors. There we go, that keyword, protectors. Okay? So we would tick that box. And then the dragons represent knowledge and money. Do they represent knowledge and money? What do you think? Do they represent knowledge and money? And if so, where's the evidence for that? Good, yes, they are linked to this idea of people being born in that year as being wise. Yes, good. And what about the money part? Where do we see the idea of money mentioned in that paragraph? Can anybody see the keyword for money? There's actually 2. Yes, good, wealthy. Good, guys, brilliant, excellent. Okay, good. Okay, there's another one. I won't tell you what it is yet. But all right, so the dragons represent knowledge and money. Yes, they do. So when I looked at the marking scheme for this piece of paper, for this exam, which I don't have right here, sorry. Essentially, it said that if you got 2 right, you got 1 mark. But if you got another 1 right, if you got all 3 right, you got 2 marks. That tricky way that Cambridge do things. So if you'd gotten these 3, you would have gotten 2. If you only got 2 of these, you get 1. Right? So in other words, read closely, pay attention to detail. Write 1 word from the first paragraph which shows the writer is contrasting ideas between 2 sentences. So 1 word that shows there's a contrast in ideas, it has to be in that first paragraph. So let's have a quick read. Wherever you live, you have probably heard of dragons and may even assume that all cultures see dragons in the same way. However, such an assumption is not correct. In some cultures, the dragon is viewed as a monster, but in others, such as in China and Vietnam, the dragon is perceived quite differently. And I'm going to stop there because the word that we're looking for is already being mentioned. Which word do you think in this paragraph shows contrast between 2 sentences? However, excellent, good, yes. However, and you know what we call these words? These are called signposting words because they change the direction of the train of thought. So we're going along this road and then we're going to turn it because it's however or but or although. All of these are signposting words. Get used to using them in your own writing. It really adds to whatever point it is you're trying to put across. So if they ask you for 1 word, make sure you only write 1 word. One of the best ways to succeed at Cambridge exams is to pay attention to the question. You have to follow the question to the T, right? So that's the 1 word, and if you got it right, you would have gotten 1 mark. If you put more than 1 word, even if however was in there, you wouldn't get it. So be very sure to pay attention to the detail of the question. So in total, you would have gotten 3 for that page. Now, let's go down to the next section. Now, this is what we're actually wanting to focus on today. You've got to write a summary. And they want you to write a summary of 70 to 90 words. And this test on summarization will be in every exam that you come across at foundation level. You will get tested on summarizing. So it's something worth paying attention to and spending time on and practicing. Okay, so write a summary of 70 to 90 words. Try and stick to that. If you go over by, 5 words, I'm sure it's okay, but try not to go beyond that. All right. In fact, for Cambridge, I think I would just try and stick to what they want. But don't panic. If it's over by 2 or 3, possibly 4 or 5 words, it's okay. But beyond that, I don't think they would accept it. Write a summary of 70 to 90 words to describe the way dragons are viewed across cultures. Remember that focus of culture. Use your own words as far as possible. So this is very important, and it's tricky because yes, you can put ideas into your own words, but you'll find when you want to start putting things into your own words, you might bring ideas into the summary that aren't there. Don't do that. Okay, stick to the ideas that are in the summary. And also, you might find that with some technical words, let's call them technical terms, that you cannot replace them. Okay, if I talk about a geological survey, what else are you going to call it? That's what it is known as, and it is a very specific process, a technological process, and that's why you can't replace it. So technical terms you cannot change. So you're able to keep some specific ideas in the text, but general words that have synonyms, you can certainly use. Or you can always approach it from an idea of, oh, maybe I don't want to put it I don't want to use a synonym, but I want to use an antonym. So I'll just rephrase my sentence using the antonym, the opposite word, so that it still makes sense, so that it reflects what was said originally with the synonym in place. Okay, so it's all about being a bit creative with the text that you're given. Now, I just wanted to point out a few ideas to you about summarization. So remember, a written summary should be a brief, so it has to be shorter than the original, and because you're given a word limit, it will be. Should be a brief, easy to read. Okay, so keep ideas short and sharp kind of a thing. Easy to read version of a longer piece of writing. A summary must contain the main points of the original text. And this is where close reading comes in. If you have the main points of the text, you can show exactly what you want to discuss just by writing your keywords next to those main points as you go through the extract. But you'll know you'll have 4 or 5 points that you're going to cover from the extract. So a summary must contain the main points of the original text and should be written in your own words. Don't just copy out chunks of the original version. So you might have a phrase or two that is similar simply because of technical issues like I've touched on before. Certain phrasings, certain ideas can't really be reworked or changed, but they must come in your own sentences and they must be formatted in your own way so that it is yours. Okay, so your marker does not want to see an entire sentence taken out from the extract and which appears in your summary. You won't get marks for that. Write your summary using correct grammar, punctuation, and sentences. Just because you are summarizing doesn't mean you are sending your message via WhatsApp or Twitter or whatever it might be, okay? You are writing a summary for somebody to understand. You're introducing them to a topic that you are briefly touching on based on more information that you received initially. So that's why you have to use correct grammar, punctuation, and sentences. A summary does not need to contain information, descriptions, or opinions that do not support general meaning of the text. So don't include things that aren't relevant. So must be relevant. Okay. So let's have a look at this extract. Now remember, it was divided into 2 paragraphs, and the way that I would approach summarizing an extract is I would try and break it down into those main ideas we've touched upon. So look at the first sentence. Wherever you live, you have probably heard of dragons, and they even assume all cultures see dragons in the same way. So this idea here is about knowledge of dragons. So knowledge of dragons, okay? What do we know about it, and what do other cultures know about it? Okay, so, or that the idea of that anyway. So knowledge of dragons, that's the first sentence. Now, it goes into more detail. However, such an assumption is not correct. In some cultures, the dragon is viewed as a monster, but in others, such as China and Vietnam, the dragon is perceived quite differently. So what is the main idea going on here? The main idea is difference, okay? So we could say different views, different cultures. Okay, so I am really summarizing this into keywords that we're going to expand on for our summary. So different views, different cultures. Okay? Or you could have different cultures have different views. Something short and sharp. Now, what else is explored here? In these cultures, dragons are used in ceremonies and parades. There is something that I was touching on before. Technical ideas, not quite technical, but very set ideas that might be difficult to phrase differently, although there are definitely ways you could do that. Can you think of another way to describe ceremonies and parades? Anybody want to give it a go? How else could we describe the idea of ceremonies and parades? Parties, yes, it is. There is definitely something celebratory. Yeah, so yes, some sort of parties. Parties might be seen as the only reason I would question it is because parties could be seen as an individual's party. But you're right; it's something to do with celebration. You're on the right track. Parties and celebrate. Religious praise. Oh, interesting. Yes, I guess the ceremonies could be seen as being religious. All right, so you're getting there, and this is what you would do. You would brainstorm. What else would I use? Write it all down. Then narrow it down. Not quite that one, not quite that one, this one. Okay, so what you're doing is perfectly right. So let's call it public celebrations. Thank you so much for your contributions there. Public celebrations. Yeah, I think then we capture that idea of party spirit. So that's what this part is focusing on, this opening sentence, this idea of public celebrations. And why do they use them for public celebrations? So I'd normally have written that here, but I just feel like I'm running out of space there. So although they may look like monsters, they actually symbolize heroism, not danger and threat. Indeed, they're seen as a symbol of power. So this next part is all about symbolism. Okay, the symbolism of dragons. We can focus on that and what they mean. And then it moves on to this idea of the Chinese even have a year of the dragon. And what about this year of the dragon? Well, we're told a few things. So that everyone born in this year will be healthy, wealthy, wise. And that's what the dragon represents. And that the year of the dragon is said to be a very prosperous year for the people of China. So this is really all about the year of the dragon. Okay. So do you see how and you might change your idea when you reread your keywords. You might be like, oh, that's not quite just about the year of the dragon. It's actually more about symbolism, for example. So you choose what your keywords are going to be for each section. And if we look at this, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 5 different things, 5 different ideas that we could explore based on this extract. Some people will only pick out 4, some people might pick out 6, but as long as there are a few key main ideas that you focus on, it should be all right. So based on that, I then went and wrote up, I looked at the mark scheme to see what they advised. Now what they wanted is if you had at least identified 4 main points. And let me just get my pen here, sorry. They wanted you to identify 4 main points. We've pointed out 5 that we felt were main points. Okay, you didn't have to agree with me. If you only had 4, that's also fine. Okay, everybody each their own, as long as there are some main points, at least 4. You would have gotten a mark for that. Okay, and then they said what they think the main points are, and what are the main points? That many or most cultures have dragons, that different cultures perceive dragons differently, that in China and Vietnam, dragons are valued and respected or seen as powerful protectors. People born in the Chinese year of the dragon are expected to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. And so if you had at least pointed out these 4 things, you're on the right track. But it's not just about pointing out these 4 main points. You have to cover them, but how you cover them is important. Use of own words and not copying text too much. So there might be the odd phrase here and there because you can't get around certain ideas, but mostly it will be in your own words. So you would have gotten a mark for that. Then the organization of ideas, and we generally would recommend that you follow the organization of ideas in your summary as they appear in the original text. Talk about dragons and the knowledge thereof. Talk about cultures, viewing them differently. Talk about parades and ceremonies. Talk about, so you see in the order that it appears in. So make sure you do that, do it methodically. Accuracy of language. Your marker wants to see that you can use punctuation, spelling, and grammar. Like I said, just because it's a summary doesn't mean you get away with shortening words or misspelling them. You must do everything as accurately as you can. And in a way that's going to test your vocabulary, because remember, you're going to be using synonyms or perhaps antonyms. And in doing that, you're pulling words from your own mind, from your own brain, okay? So they're testing whether you know how to spell the words you're choosing to use in the summary. And we've got 3 minutes left. Word length, 70 to 90 words. Like I said, really, really try to keep within that range. If you go over by a couple of words, I think it should be fine, but more than that, definitely not a good idea, okay? So here I came up with my 78 words in my summary. Many cultures recognize the idea of dragons. So let's have a look at the original sentence. It said, wherever you live, you've probably heard of dragons and may even assume that all cultures see dragons in the same way. Many cultures recognize the idea of dragons. Okay, I've used my own words, but I've made a very similar point. Next. However, such an assumption is not correct. In some cultures, the dragon is viewed as a monster, but in others, such as China and Vietnam, the dragon is perceived quite differently. I've said, not all cultures regard dragons in a similar light. Okay, so in the same way, I tried to find synonym so it didn't sound like the original extract. Some view dragons as dangerous and to be feared. whilst others revere them. Because they talked on this about the difference in essence between Western view of dragons and the Eastern view of dragons. And now we get into the specifics. They specifically mention China and Vietnam, so specifically mention them. These particular cultures revere dragons. Okay? And to revere something means to adore or respect something, to worship or idolize it. Okay? In China and Vietnam, dragons are seen to be positive, all right? Because I've talked about danger and something to be feared. Now they seem to be positive. And if you read through this summary, you'll see that I've worded things differently, but I've tried to capture that main idea. They are used in many public celebrations because they are seen to be, and I took a few keywords, it talked about magic, I talked about magical, can't really get around that. Powerful, power is power, and protective. I mean, those are key concepts, and I didn't feel I could substitute any words for those. So there will be a slight bit of copying, but not in the order or in the way that they have appeared in the extract. It uses power, protect, and magic. I've made it magical, powerful, and protective, and I've put it in a certain order that follows on from the sentences in which these words appear. The Chinese year of the dragon is a fortunate year. If you look at the original extract, it talks about being prosperous, this idea of fortune coming your way, being lucky. Okay, so it's a fortunate year, and people born in this year should be healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I took that key phrase because it's an idiom. We talk about people being healthy, wealthy, and wise. It's a thing we say. And so because it's idiomatic and everyday saying, I used it. So, and I stayed within the word limit. Maybe one or two things could have been added to give it a bit more, to flesh it out a bit. But otherwise, this is the summary of the extract in my own words.